King Solomon, the son of David and Bathsheba, stands as one of the most captivating figures in the Bible. His reign ushered in a golden age for Israel, a period marked by peace, prosperity, and the fulfillment of God's promises to his father David. Solomon's legacy is a complex tapestry, interwoven with extraordinary wisdom, breathtaking wealth, architectural brilliance, and spiritual lessons. Yet, his life also serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of compromise and spiritual decline. The transition of power from King David to Solomon was anything but smooth. As David's health waned, Adonijah, one of David's older sons, declared himself king, rallying powerful allies, including the Joab, the commander of David's army, and Abiathar the priest. However, Solomon's mother, Bathsheba, and the prophet Nathan reminded the ailing David of his promise that Solomon would succeed him. Acting swiftly, David ordered Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet to anoint Solomon as king. Solomon was paraded through the streets on David's mule, a symbolic act that signified his legitimate claim to the throne. With David's blessing and God's favor, Solomon's reign began, and Adonijah's rebellion was crushed, securing Solomon's place as Israel's king. Before his death, David gave Solomon final instructions. Walk faithfully with God, obey his commands, and uphold justice. David reminded his son of God's promise that if his descendants remained obedient, their dynasty would endure. Armed with these words, Solomon stepped into his new role, ready to lead. Solomon's request for wisdom, a king's defining moment. Early in his reign, Solomon had a remarkable encounter with God at Gibeon. In a dream, the Lord appeared to him, saying, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Rather than asking for wealth, power, or long life, Solomon humbly requested wisdom to govern his people and discern right from wrong. Pleased with Solomon's request, God granted him unparalleled wisdom. In addition, God promised him wealth and honor like no other king in history, and assured him that if he remained faithful, he would enjoy a long reign. This divine wisdom became evident when two women came before Solomon, each claiming to be the mother of the same infant. Solomon proposed a shocking solution: cut the baby in half and give each woman a share. One woman agreed, but the other begged to give the child to the other woman, revealing herself as the true mother. This act of discernment spread Solomon's fame far and wide, cementing his reputation as a ruler blessed with divine insight. One of Solomon's greatest achievements was the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, a project his father David had dreamed of but was not permitted to accomplish. David had gathered materials in preparation, but it was Solomon who had the honor of building this grand and sacred structure. The temple that took 7 years to complete and involved thousands of skilled laborers, craftsmen, and architects. Solomon spared no expense, using cedar wood from Lebanon, gold, silver, and precious stones. The Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber, housed the Ark of the Covenant, representing God's presence among his people. The dedication of the temple was a grand event. Solomon led the nation in prayer, acknowledging God's greatness and asking that the temple be a place where people could seek forgiveness and experience his presence. As Solomon concluded his prayer, fire came down from heaven, consuming the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. The temple became the spiritual heart of Israel, symbolizing unity and devotion to God. Solomon's wisdom attracted rulers from distant lands, including the famous Queen of Sheba. Intrigued by reports of his wisdom and wealth, the queen visited Solomon, bringing lavish gifts of gold, spices, and precious stones. She tested him with difficult questions, all of which Solomon answered with ease. Overwhelmed, the Queen of Sheba exclaimed, "The report I heard in my country about your wisdom and wealth was true, but not even half was told to me. During Solomon's reign, Israel flourished economically. Trade alliances with neighboring nations brought exotic goods, gold and silver, into the kingdom. The Bible notes that silver was as common as stones in Jerusalem. Solomon's wealth, wisdom, and architectural accomplishments made Israel a beacon of prosperity and peace. Despite his extraordinary gifts, Solomon's later years were marked by the spiritual decline. One of the primary causes of his downfall was his marriages to foreign women. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, many of whom were princesses from surrounding nations. These marriages, though politically advantageous, came with spiritual consequences. God had commanded the Israelites not to intermarry with foreign nations, warning that such unions would lead them into idolatry. Unfortunately, Solomon disregarded this command. His foreign wives turned his heart away from God, and Solomon built altars for pagan gods like Ashtoreth, Moloch, and Chemosh. He even participated in their worship, violating his covenant with God. Angered by Solomon's disobedience, God declared that the kingdom would be torn from his descendants. However, for the sake of David, the division would not occur during Solomon's lifetime. Instead, after Solomon's death, the kingdom would be split into two: Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Solomon ruled over Israel for 40 years, but his spiritual decline cast a shadow over his legacy. After his death, his son Rehoboam ascended the throne, but his harsh policies led to widespread discontent. The 10 northern tribes rebelled, forming the kingdom of Israel under the Jeroboam, leaving Rehoboam to rule only over Judah. This division, foretold by God, marked the beginning of a troubled era for both kingdoms. The life of Solomon offers valuable lessons for believers today. His early years demonstrate the importance of seeking wisdom and aligning one's desires with God's will. When Solomon prioritized wisdom over personal gain, God blessed him abundantly. However, Solomon's later years serve as a warning about the dangers of compromise. Despite his wisdom, Solomon's disobedience and idolatry led to devastating consequences. His story reminds us that even the wisest among us are not immune to temptation, and that continued faithfulness to God is essential. Solomon's life is a mixture of a triumph and tragedy, a reminder that human wisdom and success without faithfulness to God will ultimately fall short. His story points forward to the need for a greater king, one who would lead with perfect wisdom, righteousness, and obedience. That king is Jesus Christ, who fulfills the promises Solomon could not. Through Christ, we find the true wisdom and restoration that Solomon's life foreshadowed. Solomon's legacy endures through his writings. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon, which continue to provide spiritual insight. His temple, though later destroyed, remains a symbol of Israel's covenant relationship with God. Ultimately, Solomon's story encourages us to seek God's wisdom, walk in obedience, and remain faithful to the end.